You have 800 friends. You can see what 800 people had for breakfast. You know about their vacations, their breakups, their new jobs, their political opinions, their pets, their children's milestones. Your phone buzzes with their updates dozens of times a day. By any historical measure, you are more socially informed than any human being who has ever lived, and you have not had a real conversation in 11 days. This is not a contradiction. This is the design. Somewhere along the way, an entire generation of technology was built to maximize something that looks like connection, feels like connection, and is engineered with the precision of a Swiss watch to generate engagement, while systematically failing to deliver the one thing connection was always supposed to provide: the feeling of actually being known. This is the loneliness algorithm. And understanding how it works may be the most important relationship advice you ever receive. To understand how we got here, you need to understand a number: 150. In 1992, anthropologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford University published research correlating primate brain size with social group size. His finding, now famously known as Dunbar's number, suggested that the human brain has a cognitive ceiling on the number of stable social relationships it can meaningfully maintain. Approximately 150 people, not 150 acquaintances. 150 relationships with actual social weight. People whose lives you track, whose obligations to you and you to them are mutually understood. People you would help move apartments or call in a crisis. For the entirety of human evolutionary history, this number defined the boundary of your social world, your village, your tribe, your extended family. The architecture of human social life was built around this ceiling, refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Then, within the span of about 15 years, social media platforms invited you to maintain not 150 relationships, but thousands. And your brain, magnificently adapted for small group intimacy, catastrophically unprepared for large-scale social broadcasting, did something predictable. It tried to keep up. And in trying to keep up with thousands of shallow connections, it had less capacity left for the deep ones. Here is where the algorithm enters the story. Social media platforms did not initially intend to engineer loneliness. They intended to engineer engagement. But in the process of optimizing for engagement, they discovered something that should disturb you deeply. The content that generates the most engagement is rarely the content that generates the most genuine connection. A 2018 study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, led by researcher Brian Primack at the University of Pittsburgh, found that heavy social media use was strongly associated with increased perceived social isolation, even after controlling for actual offline social activity. People who spent more time on social platforms felt more alone, regardless of how socially active they actually were in their physical lives. The mechanism behind this finding is what researchers call social comparison at scale. Psychologist Leon Festinger first described social comparison theory in 1954. The idea that humans evaluate their own social standing, abilities, and emotions by comparing themselves to others. In Festinger's era, that comparison happened against a handful of visible peers. Today, it happens against a curated highlight reel of thousands of people simultaneously, each one presenting only their most photogenic, most successful, most enviable moments. Your brain, attempting this comparison at scale, concludes something false but deeply felt. Everyone else is thriving, connected, and surrounded by friends. You alone are isolated, but the algorithm does something even more specific than simply showing you highlight reels. It learned through billions of engagement data points that a particular type of interaction generates the most reliable engagement: parasocial connection. A parasocial relationship is a one-sided psychological bond a person forms with a media figure, an influencer, a streamer, a content creator, who does not know they exist. The term was coined by sociologists Donald Horton and Richard Wohl in 1956, originally to describe how television viewers related to news anchors and talk show hosts. The phenomenon has since exploded in scale and intensity in the social media era. Here is what makes parasocial connection so algorithmically valuable. It feels like relationship without requiring any of the vulnerability, reciprocity, or risk that real relationships demand. You can watch a streamer for 3 hours and feel like you know them intimately. You owe them nothing. They will never disappoint you in the specific, personal way a real friend can. They will never need anything from you at 2 a.m. The relationship asks nothing and gives the feeling of everything. Researcher Jonathan Cohen at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem has spent years studying parasocial relationships, and his work suggests something crucial. Parasocial bonds can activate many of the same neurological reward pathways as real relationships, while requiring almost none of the emotional labor. The algorithm discovered this and optimized for it ruthlessly. Why would it not? Parasocial content keeps you watching for hours. Real relationships pull you away from the screen. Imagine two versions of a single Tuesday evening. In the first version, you come home and call a close friend. The conversation is imperfect. There are pauses. You have to actually listen, actually respond, actually be present to another person's specific, complicated, sometimes inconvenient reality. It takes effort. It is occasionally uncomfortable. By the end, you feel something hard to manufacture any other way. The specific warmth of being truly known by another human being who chose, in that moment, to know you. In the second version, you come home and open an app. Within seconds, you are immersed in the lives of dozens of people. Funnier, more interesting, more put together than you feel right now. You watch a live stream where a creator addresses you guys in a tone that feels personal, even though you are one of 40,000 simultaneous viewers. You comment. The creator does not see your comment, but the comment box made you feel like you participated. 3 hours pass. You feel a strange combination of stimulated and depleted. You go to sleep having interacted with hundreds of people and genuinely connected with none of them. The algorithm did not choose the second version for you out of malice. It chose it because, by every metric it was built to optimize, the second version is a categorical success. More time on platform, more engagement, more data generated, more advertising revenue. The fact that it leaves you lonelier is not a bug in the system. It is irrelevant to the system. The system was never optimizing for your connection. It was optimizing for your attention. The consequences of this are not abstract. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General released a formal advisory declaring loneliness and social isolation a public health epidemic, citing research that chronic loneliness carries a mortality risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The advisory specifically identified the substitution of digital interaction for in-person connection as a contributing factor, not because digital communication is inherently harmful, but because of how it has been engineered to mimic connection while subtly displacing it. Sociologist Sherry Turkle at MIT has spent over a decade studying this phenomenon, summarized in her influential framing, "Alone Together." Her research describes people sitting in the same physical room, each absorbed in their own device, simultaneously hyper-connected to a global network and almost entirely disconnected from the person 3 feet away from them. The algorithm did not create human loneliness. Loneliness has always existed. What the algorithm did was discover that loneliness, the ache for connection, is an extraordinarily powerful engagement driver. A lonely person checks their phone more often, seeking the relief that connection might provide. The algorithm learned to offer the appearance of relief repeatedly without ever providing the substance. It learned to keep the ache alive because the ache is what keeps you coming back. Here is the counterintuitive part. None of this means digital connection is worthless. Researcher Jeffrey Hall at the University of Kansas has proposed what he calls the social investment theory of friendship. The idea that close relationships require a specific minimum threshold of sustained mutual time investment, somewhere around 200 hours, to develop genuine closeness. His research also shows that digital tools used intentionally can support that investment beautifully. A video call with a distant friend, a sustained text conversation that deepens over months, a shared online project with people you genuinely know. These can absolutely build the 150 meaningful relationships your brain evolved to need. The difference is intentionality versus passive consumption. Digital tools used to deepen specific, chosen relationships build connection. Digital platforms used to passively consume the broadcasted lives of hundreds of weak-tie acquaintances. And parasocial figures simulate connection while quietly starving the real thing. The algorithm cannot tell the difference between these two uses. It does not care which one you choose. Its only metric is whether you keep scrolling, which means the responsibility for choosing falls entirely on you. And almost nobody has been taught to recognize that this choice exists. The divide forming in the world right now runs directly through this distinction. On one side, people who use digital platforms primarily for passive broadcast consumption, scrolling through the curated lives of acquaintances and the manufactured intimacy of parasocial figures, who feel, despite hundreds of connections, an inexplicable and growing isolation they cannot name. On the other side, people who have recognized the architecture and made a deliberate choice to use these same tools differently, to seek out the deliberately effortful, occasionally uncomfortable, ultimately irreplaceable work of being known by a small number of people who actually know them back. This is why organizations like Pinnacle AI Solutions emphasize not just adopting technology, but using it with strategic intention, understanding what a tool is actually optimized to do, and deciding consciously whether that optimization serves your actual goals or merely serves the platform's. Because the algorithm will never tell you that 800 friends and 0 real conversations is a problem. It does not have a stake in your loneliness or your connection. It only has a stake in your attention. The question of which kind of life you are actually building, connected or merely surrounded, is a question only you can answer. You have 800 friends. You know what 800 people had for breakfast. And you have not had a real conversation in 11 days. The algorithm did not do this to you maliciously. It simply optimized for what it could measure. And what it could measure was never the thing you actually needed. The good news is that the thing you actually need has not changed. It has not been replaced. It has not become obsolete. It is still there, waiting, exactly where it has always been, in the effortful, imperfect, deeply human act of actually calling someone back.